Okay, so I am Jennifer Wells and I'm the Vice President of the Zembrodt Education Center, and I'm here with Ashley. Ashley, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, I'm happy to. My name is Ashley Barlow. I am an attorney licensed in Kentucky and Ohio. My legal practice centers around families that have children with disabilities. So I do special needs estate planning. I do divorces, and most of my divorce work involves a child with a disability. And then the bulk of my legal practice is special education support. So I will go to IEP meetings, I will help with discipline and behavior kind of issues. And then I'll also do the legal side if we have to file due process. And so that's my attorney hat. I also have a second company that's called Ashley Barlow Co. And what Ashley Barlow company does is it provides online resources to parents and families and teachers and community members, basically anybody that sits at the IEP team, about special education. So there's lots of free resources on the website for that company. There's a podcast, and then I have a paid video training series that people can join and train themselves in order to advocate at the IEP team or AEP table. And then the third pertinent hat is I'm also the parent of a little guy that has Down syndrome. My son is 10. His name is Jack, and he has Down syndrome. I've been really involved in the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Cincinnati, actually just rolled off as the president of the board there. So that's me in a nutshell in the disability world, at least.
All right, that's a lot. What has working with parents of children with disabilities taught you? And if you want to answer the question, what has being the mom of someone with Down syndrome taught you?
So working with people with disabilities has really taught me how to prioritize things. You know, I think that we as parents have this kind of really narrowed focus on what's important in the world, the difference between good and bad. You know, we don't have a whole lot of time for extraneous stress. And so I think it's a really neat characteristic that a lot of parents that have children with disabilities have. I really think we're almost too busy to care about the small stuff. And so not sweating the small stuff is like not even on our radar. But then in addition to that, you know, I think parenting Jack, what's been impactful for me as the parent of a child with a disability has really been that kind of really heart-centered interpersonal communication that you experience with somebody. I think that is something that I certainly thought I had experienced, and then you know, meeting him as a baby and raising him has just really strengthened my my ability to communicate and connect with other people also. And then I think kind of an offset of that is just the community that you get in either working professionally or personally in the disability community. You know, I mean, I've just got some wonderful friends and colleagues that I wouldn't have if I didn't have Jack.
Have you been in the Northern Kentucky world for Jack's entire lifetime?
Yes, yep. I've lived in Fort Thomas almost my entire life.
Okay.
I took a year in Louisville, a few years in Hyde Park, and here I am right back here.
Right back here. Okay. We're glad to have you. We need you here. What are some of the biggest concerns or worries that parents or clients have expressed on this journey?
I think, you know, in my estate planning practice, people are very concerned about the future. They're very concerned about who's going to care for their child, if there's going to be enough money. You know, financial concerns are really significant and important, and something that, you know, a lot of people are frustrated about and anxious about. And then I think is kind of secondary to that is this stress of government agencies that we need in our lives because, you know, you get wonderful opportunities. You know, if you are in a transition program that is sponsored by The Point, then chances are you've got Voc Rehab that's supporting you, or you've got somebody from the waiver that's supporting you. And those are really fantastic resources. But then at the same time, you always have somebody that is kind of like breathing down your neck. You know, you're afraid, can I spend money on this? Can I not spend money on this? Kind of all of those different features, which is intimidating and really worrisome. So I think that's probably the biggest concern from an estate planning standpoint. From a school standpoint, and you know, divorce is kind of really unique to the family, so I won't really speak to that. From a school standpoint, what really I think is the biggest stress that parents have that I can ameliorate is that lack of understanding, which then completely de-equalizes the power at the table. So parents are so overwhelmed. You know, I mean, there is a lot of information in special education, and you buy a book about special ed. I just happen to have one here, Jennifer. I mean, you know, this one's called Education Law, but like, it's so thick. Anything you buy is so thick and intimidating. And so if I can, you know, if somebody comes into my law practice and they just piece it out and I say, okay, well, you're just talking about going to this meeting. What are our concerns for this meeting? Or we just have this behavior concern. Let me walk you through the legality of working through a behavior concern. That seems to help. Another thing that I can do, though, is through Ashley Barlow Company, I can put together these comprehensive trainings, whether it's just a PDF that you download that you might pay a little bit of money for, or that might be free but not as voluminous, or even this 10-week video series that really empowers parents with information and then gives them at least a baseline so that they know what they don't know. You know, because a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't even know what I don't know. And so, and there's a lot of misconceptions that teachers say, that parents say, that your friends might say, whatever, that just simply aren't founded in the law. And, you know, it actually is kind of hard as an attorney when people come to me with that stuff because, you know, they'll come to me and say, well, they, you know, fill in the blank, like the school can't do that. And I'm like, well, what? The school can do that. The school's actually obligated to do that. And then, you know, they'll say, well, the teacher told me, and my friend told me, and even my physical therapist told me. And I'm like, well, here's what the United States Department of Education has to say. But I have to pull the statute and maybe a guidance letter from the Department of Ed, and then all this other stuff, because all of these other sources have said, no, when in fact the law says, oh, sure, we can do that, you know? So it's a lack of information.
Do you think that, so my next question was around like, what is the missing piece, if anything, around support for parents and families? Do you think that what we're talking about advocacy and just being informed or being overwhelmed by the information?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and I really empathize with it because it is really overwhelming. And I think there's also kind of an inability to be able to get it, right? Like, you know, kind of like what I said about the government. I'm thinking about Medicaid, for example. Like my child wasn't on a Medicaid waiver until he was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. And I was literally sitting in a meeting with other moms and somehow waivers came up. They always seem to come up. And every other mom at this table not only was on Medicaid, but I had helped them do some part of their Medicaid application. And I'm like, oops. And so I was like, well, you know, I've got, there's cycles that people, you know, they'll open it up and then you can get on or something, or they change a criterion and then I'll be darned, that criterion applies to your family or whatever. And so we just kind of squeezed in when the timing was right. But you know, even I, who can read the regulations and can navigate all of the government websites and everything, still what I can find is the inconsistencies and say, oh, okay, well, this must mean this. Whereas if you're a parent, you're reading this for the first time, It's too overwhelming to the point that sometimes I have adult parents that come into my office and they say, okay, my child's 25 and we haven't done anything. I don't have an estate plan. My child's not on Social Security. My child was gratuitously employed by, and I don't mean gratuitously, but doesn't have any job supports, nothing, but was employed by a small business, and Voc Rehab isn't helping. There's no job coach from any place. And all of a sudden that fell down, all of those supports just fell away. And now we're lonely and we're bored and we aren't engaged in the community, and all these behaviors are developing and everything. And when that happens, I can't say, okay, well, you need to apply for a waiver, you need to apply for Social Security, you need to do this, because it completely overwhelms people. So we really do have to take it layer by layer.
What tips would you offer to parents? And I know that could change depending on the age of the child. But do you have any top tips that you give to parents?
I think one advantage that we have in the Down syndrome community that I see is lacking in other communities is community. I have so many people that I could call if I had a question. Okay. And I do. So, if you've got an estate planning question or an education question or a transition to adulthood question or an employment question, transportation question, social question, you need a community. You need different people of whom you can ask those questions. And so I think the first thing is to get involved with an organization that is disability specific or even specific to your child's particular diagnosis or diagnoses. My child has ADHD in addition to Down syndrome, and he's also got some medical stuff. And so I've got kind of the subset of medical moms in the Down syndrome community, but I also have read probably 20 inches of books on ADHD because I needed to empower myself with that information. And it wasn't as readily accessible in my particular Down syndrome community. And so I think community is number one, but then I don't think it could hurt to consult with an attorney about the things that are just questions that you might have. So I sometimes liken it to people that need financial information, but they don't have enough money to invest. There are financial consultants that you might not even choose to house your money, but they'll just give you financial advice on an hourly basis. And you might give them $250, but in the grand scheme of things, that could save you hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, or heck, even if it's $1,000, I'd pay $250 to save $1,000. And so attorneys can do the same. You can find attorneys that can do just one-time consults, and if they don't know the answer, they can refer you to somebody that can, or they can say, I don't know, but let me take a look and see if I can get the answer. And so I think, if you find yourself reading all those regulations and thinking, is this too good to be true? Or could this possibly be this way? Or what do I have to do for my guardianship accounting every year? It doesn't hurt to ask an attorney just for guidance. Can you be, I always say when I do that I'm a tour guide, that I'm just kind of walking you along the way behind the scenes, and you can come back to me for as many of those consults as you want, but if you want to take the lead because it's less expensive, then go for it. I'll be here cheering you on from the background.
I don't think a lot of families know this about the Point, but we have a small scholarship fund, and I believe this was I created it when I first got to know you or spoke to you maybe years ago.
Yes.
But if you would like to do an hourly consultation, we can provide up to $250 for families that are eligible based on family size or income, or maybe you have an extenuating circumstance. You've lost a job or you have high medical bills, something like that. Because the Point cannot do everything, and so we don't have an attorney, and we try our best with advocacy, but those are two areas where we really like to provide support for families to find that support outside of the Point. So anyway, we have it. If you need it, you can contact me.
Yeah, I think that's a really fabulous resource that's available, and parents would get so much value out of even an annual meeting with an attorney. I have parents that come to me for special ed issues, And they come to me before every single IEP meeting. So the IEP has to be reviewed annually. And so they feel comfortable. They know what they're doing. They know their child. They know what's next. But they still will bring the IEP document to me in draft form and say, what are your thoughts? You know, are we missing anything? The school, look, they want to change the minutes, or they want to take away the supplementary aid or service. And then we kind of walk through those things together. And we not only talk about what, you know, kind of the entitlement, what the child deserves, but then in addition to that, how to get it, you know, because so you could understand the laws, but actually knowing what to do with them is where the skill comes in. So yes, it takes skill to be able to read laws, to navigate all the governmental mumbo jumbo. That takes skill and patience, and I don't have a whole lot of patience, so I don't know why God gave me this passion, because I'm like, I'm not patient. But I'm diligent and I'm tenacious, and even if it's me that's getting in my way, I'm going to figure it out. But then, you know, figuring out, okay, well, I want more special ed minutes, or I want a special service, or I want less, I want something more inclusionary. There's skill in getting that. So like one example is the IEP document goes in order. And so if you want, for example, more services, you know, you want more time in OT or more time in PT, or you want to add orientation and mobility for a child with a visual impairment that's getting ready to access the community at large, then we need to make sure in the very beginning that we develop a need for that at the beginning of the IEP and those present levels of performance. And so, you know, there's skill to that. And some of that is really rote and easy to teach, but some of it is just like my gut after working with several school districts, or after having similar clients and that sort of thing too. Right. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in going to a professional, even if you feel very informed.
What would you like people who are not as familiar with disabilities to know about disabilities, or people with disabilities?
So, you know, what I like for people to know about my son, Jack, is that he's Jack. Like I always say, so we have a friend who I know won't mind that I share his story. My son has this just delightfully quirky, unique friend named Brady. And I always say Brady is the Bradyest Brady of all Bradys. You know, it's like there's no other Brady. And my dad's the same way. There is no other person that is like my dad. He's the courtiest Curty of all Kurts. And Jack's the same way. You know, we all are. We're all so uniquely beautiful. And if we didn't have those differences, then our lives would be so boring. You know, if we all had the same personalities and the same interests and the same values, we wouldn't ever challenge ourselves in thought. We wouldn't ever grow in love. If we didn't have challenges, we wouldn't get to overcome them and experience the joy of overcoming a challenge. And so to me, the thing that is so awesome is that difference. You know, I love the term differently abled. I know it's getting some bad press right now, or bad rap right now, but I like it so long as it isn't, you know, offensive to you, because I think it's really beautiful that we're all different. And so, you know, on a grand scheme, that's what I would say. On a small level, of course, probably the people that are watching this are already very familiar with somebody that has a disability. But what I really encourage my family to do, and people that are within my kind of influence, you know, whether it's somebody at Findlay Market that is just like staring at Jack, or a child that doesn't seem to get Jack, or wherever, like I find that there's so many opportunities to advocate. And what I really like for people to do is to talk to Jack, you know, not talk about him, but to talk to him. And so if we're playing on play set at his brother's baseball game, you know, kind of in the outfield, and somebody says, "What's his name?" I'm like, "Well, why don't you ask him what his name is? I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you."
Right.
Or what's Jack going to be for Halloween? I'm like, "Well, hey, Jack, why don't you tell him what you're going to be for Halloween?" And we talk about differences that way too. And I have to say, because we go to Children's Hospital so often, because we are, you know, we go to disability organization functions so often and that sort of thing, I have to teach Jack that a lot. So we were at Children's not too long ago, and there was a child that was stimming vocally. And, you know, he was kind of moaning, and he also had a fidget that was, it was annoying Jack, you know, I mean, he was like, "Be quiet with the fidget," because Jack's auditorily distracted. And what I had to explain to Jack is there's room for both of you in this waiting room. You know, you're going to have to learn to tune that out. And that's something that is helping him to be able to sit and wait for the doctor also. And so that's a beautiful support that he has. And let's think of something that you can use in order to tune that out. And so we distracted ourselves with a show that was playing, and we got on with it. But, you know, Jack wanted to be like upset with this other person that needed these supports. And so, you know, it's never perfect. And that's actually, Jennifer, that's another point. It's never perfect, right? Like, and it's okay. It's okay to talk about differences. It's okay to talk about things that might feel uncomfortable. If we don't talk about them, then everybody thinks that it's uncomfortable. If I don't say, "Well, yeah, Jack's got some behavior stuff," then people are like, "Oh my gosh, he's got some behavior stuff." You know, like if I just come out and say, like, "Yeah, when he was 3, he pulled people's hair out." If he really liked you, he'd pull your hair out. And I would say, like, we got to put that hair in a ponytail, because otherwise things wouldn't go well.
Right.
So, you know, it's also okay to talk about it. That was a long answer.
No, that's a great answer. I love that answer. Why don't we finish with this question? What is your greatest hope for the people that you support and for Jack?
So my greatest hope for Jack, I'll do that first, and then we'll do the grand finale about everybody else.
All right.
My greatest hope for Jack is that he, I mean, my short-term hope is that he finds some peace. He tends to get dysregulated, and I just really want to figure that out for him, because he is like so dynamic when he's calm. And so, you know, that's kind of like my mom worry all day long. But on a grand scheme, I want for Jack to be interested in things and interesting enough that he keeps his community, because he has just this really great group of friends, and he's got really neat interests that his friends share. And I don't want for Jack to have a small enough life that his friends' interests and values surpass him. So, you know, kind of my quintessential thing is, if he's 28 and he's still bowling on Tuesday nights with those guys, then I will call it a success. And if he doesn't want that, then obviously that is A-okay by me, but I want to live in a community where he can continue with his independence, whatever's safe and whatever's accessible for him, and that he really keep a community no matter what that community looks like, because I think there's so much value in our other friends. My biggest hope for the disability community is progress. You know, I mean, we have wonderful laws. Like IDEA, the special education law, is phenomenal. There is so much support in that federal law. It's just outstanding. But it's not implemented. It's not funded. It's really misinterpreted, sometimes intentionally. And so we need that progress. We need to keep going. We need to, you know, we might fall down the staircase, but we need to get right back up on our feet and walk right back up that staircase. And so, you know, in my life of 42 years, we have, you know, gotten the ADA, and we've gotten some really great laws. IDEA has been amended, but there's still so much work to be done. And
Mhm.
I'm really proud of our community, because it is all of us
Mhm.
that have made the strides that we've made. But there's so much
Mhm.
work still to be done.
Yes, so much more. I kind of get shocked when I shouldn't be shocked, but I don't know if people know that the legislation that protects people with disabilities, it's really not been around for very long. And
Isn't it crazy? I
yeah,
mean,
so in our lifetimes, I guess.
so, well, Brown versus Board of Education was segregation, when we think about it in terms of racial segregation, but it really did help with schools. But Park and Mills were 1972.
Mhm.
And then that, of course, led to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I
Right.
mean, a lot of people that are watching this think about, like, Section 504 has only been in play since 1973.
Right.
And then Kennedy established, Social Security and those
Mhm.
kinds of things. But some of the things that benefit people with disabilities weren't really established until 1975,
Mhm.
And then, of course, we got the Education for All Handicapped Children, EHAC, which then led into IDEA, and that was 1975
Mhm.
also. But it is, I mean, it's just, and when you look through case law and you see things that are still happening in schools,
Right.
um, it's devastating
Mhm.
sometimes. And I'll tell you, so this week I had two examples, and I think these are important examples for people that are interested. One was I spoke at a med school, and we talked about the difference between guardianship and supported decision making.
Mhm.
And the reason why this course was taught by this particular professor was because she had been in a national discussion where guardianship was still just like suggested, this is what you need to do, without even taking a pit stop at supported decision making. And
Mhm.
she said, oh my gosh, I need to impact all of the med students that come out of my school so that they know that supported decision making is what the ARC recommends as a lesser restrictive alternative. And then I was in my coaching call for my digital training course, and there are several members of disability staffs that are the people that are supporting families in IEP meetings. So, if your disability organization will come to an IEP meeting with you, these are the people that would come. And they both were of the understanding that, well, two in particular, were of the understanding that if a student has a particular disability code, like in Kentucky, maybe it's FMD, that then they would have to go to a self-contained room where a teacher had a certain teaching certificate, which
Mhm.
is absolutely wrong. And there's like stacks and stacks of Department of Education guidance that says exactly the contrary to that, because it's been believed for so long.
Okay.
And so there are so many misconceptions that are just really they're sad at best and sickening. Probably there's worse words to describe them also.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. I love that you're a parent. You can speak to this from a parent perspective and a professional perspective. I think that will be really helpful to a lot of families.
Good. Well, I'm happy to be a resource, and I'm really grateful that you invited me.